The everlasting covenant. What are the words in the everlasting covenant? And part of our question is, are the feasts and festivals part of the everlasting covenant? And do we need to keep them today? Because we've been talking about the Dawn Day since January, and there's been some calendar language mixed up in that, with Tim speaking about Yahusha and things that were happening in his ministry and the calendar studies that we're doing. There's no reason to do a calendar study if you don't observe the feast and festivals. You don't need to have a calendar study because you just count every 7 days to find your weekly Shabbat. But a calendar study involves the understanding of finding the feasts and festivals. Now, there's lots of calendars out there. I bet you there's 600 different ones, and a lot of people don't know how to sort out this one from that one. And what we've been working on in the last 10, 12 years is the covenant calendar. And we discovered that the calendar that we have found in the Torah and also in the Gospels is a blood ratified covenant calendar. But where did it come from? Well, if it's a blood ratified covenant calendar that actually tells us how to find the exact right date for the feasts and festivals, then that means that there has to be something where it came from. So we're going to show this everlasting covenant. Now, there's lots of different covenants. You can go to the internet and you can find covenants all the way from Adam to Noah and all, there's all kinds of covenants. But what we're talking about here is the everlasting blood ratified covenant. What are the words? How can we find the words? How can we understand the words? Now, if it's an everlasting covenant, it actually has to start in heaven before there was anything created on the earth, because that covenant is everlasting. Now, we also have to remember that Yah's covenant has to change a little bit, if I can say it, has to be adjusted when the sin problem happened, okay? And then when you get to the cross and there's no more sacrifices that are needed, then there's another little adjustment because you don't need the sacrifices. So, but the basic covenant is about the same. But when Yahuwah had Adam and Eve in the garden and they sinned, he needed to instruct them what his covenant was. So even though it isn't written down with Adam, it's not written down with Noah, it's not written down with Abraham. All we have is that Abraham kept the commandments, the statutes, the judgments. He kept the covenant, he kept the laws. I think that's about chapter 26. So we have little pieces of information all the way from Adam that tell us that Yah's patriarchs were keeping his covenant. They were in covenant. They were following his instructions, but they weren't written down at that point in time. It was passed down. And basically with Adam being so close to the tree of life and living so long, Kathleen can tell you that you can see in the studies that we've already done in those first 3 parts, that Adam was an instructor. He was the one that was the umbrella for everyone to understand these covenant laws. Now, of course, sin came. Cain kind of was doing his own thing. We have good and evil right from the very beginning. But by the time we get 2,500 years after creation, we are now at the story of Moses, when Moses is asked to go back to Egypt. He was out in the wilderness for 40 years. You probably all know that story. He had an encounter at the foot of Mount Sinai. Remember, the burning bush was there. And I like this part of the study. I can send you a little paper on that too if you want. But the 10 encounters that Moses had with Mount Sinai are very interesting. Now, I thought there was 3 encounters in my Adventist roots. And then I heard somebody say, way back, maybe about 2012 or 2008, that there was 7 encounters with Moses in Mount Sinai. Well, no, there's not. There's 10. There's 10 of them. The first one is at the burning bush. It's around Exodus chapter 3, where Yahuwah is instructing Moses that he needs to go and gather up his people and bring them out of Egypt. It is time for them to come out of Egypt to make their trip to the land of Canaan, the land of milk and honey. So away he goes, and you know the story of the plagues and how they are delivered on that 10th plague. And then that was Passover. That was the Passover day, and they were delivered at midnight. So that deliverance took place at midnight, but they didn't leave Egypt at that point in time. They got ready. They were told to get ready to leave in the morning. So the morning would have actually been the 15th day of the month. And that on the calendar is actually the Feast of Unleavened Bread Sabbath. So they get ready to move out, and within 3 days, they are crossing the Red Sea. By the time you get through all their campsites, campsite number 11, they're at the foot of Mount Sinai. You can read all about their journeys and what happened up to that point. But it was at Mount Sinai. There, by the way, you probably all remember there was quite a bit of grumbling going on from the time they left Egypt, especially with the great multitude. But by the time they got to Mount Sinai, this is where Yahuwah said, okay, we need to now make an agreement. I need to see if these people want to come into covenant with me, and if they want me to be their leader, if they want me to be their Elohim, then we need to make this arrangement. Now, it could be that a lot of the Hebrews had lost the understanding of these covenant instructions because they were in bondage for many, many years. The Pharaoh was very harsh on them. They were not even allowed to keep Sabbath. Remember, they were building bricks, and towards the end, they even had to find their own straw to get the same quota of bricks. So being under bondage and slavery, there's probably many of them that lost the understanding or the privilege of being able to stay within those covenant instructions. However, that was preserved through Aaron, through the tribe of Levi, that was preserved there. Somehow those instructions were preserved coming down from Abraham and whatnot. That's just another big study. But here we are at the foot of Mount Sinai, and it starts in chapter 19, where it says, I would like you to have your Bibles open and just follow me, because there is a lot of calendar language here. And truly, everyone, to put these puzzle pieces together, it's the calendar studies that put the pieces together so you can understand. But it starts out in the 3rd month. Calendar language right there in the first words. In the 3rd month, after the children of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt. Now, more calendar language. It says, on the same day, they came to the wilderness of Sinai. Now, they're in the wilderness of Sinai, but they're not at the foot of the mountain of Sinai at this point in time. It says they came into, now I'll just tell you really quickly, when it says on the same day, when you do the research, it's actually on the middle of the week. It's a Wednesday. It's the same day that they left Egypt. So Passover was on a Tuesday, Passover Tuesday in Egypt, and they left early in the morning on Wednesday. So it's the same day that they're coming in. It's the day of the week, not a date on the month. So they came into the wilderness of Sinai on the 15th day of the 3rd month. And then verse 2, it says, for they had departed from Rephidim, and then they had come to the desert of Sinai, and they camped in the wilderness. So when you read it carefully, they're making a journey. They're moving. They moved camp quite a few times. So verse 2 is telling you that they departed from Rephidim. They came into the desert of Sinai, and they were camping in the wilderness. And then it says, so Israel camped there before the mountain. So they've made it from being just in the wilderness of Sinai to actually at the foot of the mountain. Now, what I'd like to say is that chapter 19 is a very important chapter. This is a story This is a story that is older than the cross. It's an old story. And it's probably, in a way, the foundation, the very important part for the gospel story. Exodus 19. I wonder how many of us have really read this chapter and understood what was going on in it. I know as Adventists, we all know that Exodus 20 is where you find the 10 Commandments. I think everybody knows that. But as I was growing up in the church, nobody said to me, well, you need to know what's happening in Exodus chapter 19. And I will be the first one to admit, I read this at least 15 times in the 15 years from 2000 to 2014 when I was reading my Bible through every single year. And I didn't even figure out what was going on in chapter 19. Somebody had to show it to me too. So this is an extremely important chapter. And basically, verse 9 is an extremely important verse. Exodus 19, verse 9. Verse 3, and Moses went up to Elohim, and Yahuwah called him from the mountain. So this, I'm calling this the second trip. Even though the first encounter wasn't a trip up into the mountain, it could be in Exodus 3 that burning bush was up in the mountain. We don't really know, but I'm calling this trip number 2. There are 8 encounters with Moses and Mount Sinai. 2 of them are at the bottom of the mountain. The one is the burning bush, and the other encounter, I think, is number 8, where he moves the tabernacle of the tent of meeting outside the camp to the bottom of the mountain. So there's 2 encounters, but the rest of them are trips up and down the mountain. So if you want to mark this in your Bible, I'm calling this trip number 2, and just read the words. Just see what the story tells you. Read them very carefully. And Moses went up, right there. He went up into the mountain. He went up to Elohim, and Yahuwah called him from the mountain, saying, thus you shall say, here we go. We're coming into the covenant. Yahuwah is going to propose his covenant, but he's giving it to Moses first. There are 4 things that have to be present for an everlasting covenant. Here they are. There has to be a proposal to come into covenant. That's number 1, proposal. Number 2, there has to be an acceptance from the other party, and it's always between 2 parties, at least 2 parties. Number 3, there has to be blood ratification. And number 4, there has to be a covenant confirming meal. You need to have those 4 things to have an everlasting covenant. That is important, because if you don't have those 4 things and there is a covenant, it is temporary. It's not an everlasting covenant. Now you can find another everlasting covenant up in Genesis between Laban and Jacob. When they had their little tiff there, when Jacob left and Laban came chasing after him, they made an everlasting covenant, and it had these 4 components. So this is not the first time you see it. This is the second time you actually see it. So here we have Yahuwah giving his proposal to Moses. And this is what it is, all right? Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and how I brought you to myself. Now, therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice. And what does it say next? Somebody answer me. What does it say after that? In Exodus 19:5, if you will indeed obey my voice. And then what?
Keep my covenant.
Keep my covenant. That's right. Keep your mics open so you can talk to me freely, if it's not too noisy in your household. And keep my covenant. What is the covenant? He just said, if you're going to obey me and keep my covenant. Okay, but what is it? Anyway, he's talking to Moses, and he says, keep my covenant then, okay, so it says now here's the then you shall be a special treasure to me, a special treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. That's what Yah said. If you're going to obey my covenant and keep it, you're going to be a special treasure to me. And then he says to Moses, these are the words of which you shall speak to the children of Israel. I find this really interesting because Yahuwah has said, if you want to obey me and come into covenant with me, then I'm going to make you a really special treasure. You're going to be a kingdom of priests. You're going to be a holy nation. You're going to be peculiar people. You're going to be special. But he didn't tell them one single word of what the covenant was. He just said, if you want to come into covenant with me. So Moses is up at the top and he got that message. Verse number 7. So Moses came and called for the elders of the people. Where is Moses? Someone tell me, where is Moses? Is he at the top of the mountain, coming down the mountain, or at the bottom of the mountain? Where is he? This is important.
At the bottom, because he's with the elders now.
That's right. And you have to pay attention to this simple story, okay? You'll find out why. And Moses came and called for the elders of the people, and look what he did. He laid before them all the words which Yahuwah commanded. What did he tell them? Did he tell them the words of the covenant? What did he tell them?
He told them what Elohim had commanded him to tell the people, to tell all the people, right?
Yeah, and what was that?
The priest, kingdom of priests and a holy nation. He didn't tell them the whole, but it's only about that, the verse 6.
Yes, he didn't really tell them too much. It was a question, wasn't it? Do you want to come into covenant with me? Do you want to obey me? Do you want me to be your Elohim? Well, that's what he told the people.
It was just that question. Sorry, it was just that question. Do you want to come into covenant? And you shall be like priests and a holy people. So it wasn't really the covenant itself. Yes, should go ahead. So.
And that's really important. That is super important, okay? And then verse 8, we are now coming up to the second part of this everlasting covenant. Then all the people answered together and they said, all that Yahuwah has spoken, we will do. Okay, right there. So they are accepting the proposal. Okay, so we've got proposal, we've got acceptance, but there's something interesting about this acceptance because they do this 3 different times. All right, not just once. And it's kind of interesting that Yahuwah has them saying this 3 different times so that they're pretty sure of what they said. Now, when you get to the second part of verse 8, and I have a feeling we might only get to the book of the covenant here today because we're starting over. Look what it says. So Moses brought back the words of the people to Yahuwah. So what happened to Moses? Where is he? Where did Moses?
Is that his 4th encounter?
I have this as trip number 3. He's going up. This is trip number 3. Okay. And there's going to be a 4th trip in this chapter. Okay. So trip number 2, 3, and 4 are encounters with the mountain. There's 3 of them in this chapter. So he brought back the words to the people to Yahuwah. Okay, everyone, I told you verse 9 is extremely important. So don't miss what's happening here. And Yahuwah said to Moses, behold, I come to you in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you. And what else does it say? What else does it say after that? And
believe thee forever.
Hmm. So what actually happened when Moses was up there getting the proposal from Yahuwah? What happened?
They were hearing the proposal and they were agreeing to it.
Absolutely. So when Moses came down and he gave them the proposal to the people, guess what? They knew that Moses didn't change any of the words. He didn't add, he didn't take away. He told them exactly what Yahuwah had said to them because they heard it.
So we have the voice and we have the document.
Yeah, exactly. That's what happened. That is really important, really important. So Moses told the words of the people to Yahuwah. There he is. He's going back up. Then Yahuwah said to Moses, go to the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow and let them wash their clothes. So we're going up to, this is our trip number 3. He's gone back up and now he's getting the second set of instructions. Listen to the calendar language. Tell the people to sanctify them today, tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes. Verse 11, and let them be ready for the 3rd day. For on the 3rd day, Yahuwah will come down upon Mount Sinai in the sight of all people. Now, I want to ask you, why is it so important to have all this calendar language here? Why is this so important? We talked about the 19th in chapter verse 1, the 3rd month, and then it says the same day. Now we're having, why is that so important?
Because it tells us that he is observing a covenant calendar and he moves by this covenant calendar in everything that he does.
That's right. That's right. So this whole study, you actually have to go back to Passover and you have to know the covenant calendar in order to understand what day this is going to be. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is going to be day 50 of what's called the Omer count, or what is going to be Pentecost Day or Shavuot in Hebrew. Okay, so this is why the calendar language is so important. Lots of calendar language in this chapter. Okay, here's the next set of the instructions in verse 12, and I'm reading out of the New King James for any of you that wanted to know. You shall set bounds for the people all around, saying, take heed to yourselves that you do not go up to the mountain or touch its base. Whoever touches the mountain, what does it say? Whoever touches the mountain
will be killed.
Put to death.
Going to be put to death, right? So
Yeah.
Yahuwah is trying to teach them that when I ask you to do something, I mean it, and I mean it exactly the way I say it, you know, so be careful, okay? And they probably knew what it meant to be put to death, all right? All right. Not a hand shall touch him, but he shall surely, it tells you how now, you shall be stoned or shot with an arrow, whether man or beast, he shall not live. When the trumpet sounds long, they are to come near the mountain. So he's giving them very specific instructions that they know exactly what they're supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do. So Moses is up there. He's getting those instructions, and guess who heard it at the bottom of the mountain? The people heard it, didn't it? Verse 14, look what it says. Then Moses went down. He went down from the mountain to the people, and he sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes. Now, if Sunday or the first day of the week is the 3rd day and it's the 50th day, what's the first day? Because you have today, tomorrow, and the 3rd day. So what was the today? Which day of the week was the today?
Yeah, I'm lost. Repeat that again. Repeat the question.
The command was today, tomorrow, and then the 3rd day I'm going to meet with you. Pentecost is the 3rd day. That's the day Yahuwah is going to meet with them. So what is the first day? of the, is it Sunday, Monday, Tuesday? Which day of the week is the first, which is today, tomorrow, and the third day?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Count backwards.
So Pentecost was the third day. Which day was that? That was the Sunday.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so the day that they're meeting would have been Friday, 3 days back.
Right. I hope everybody's paying attention, because guess what? In calendar, you have to learn how to count to 3. And that's not a put down. That is serious.
Got it.
Shiloh, can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. So remember, as we actually studied the last time, Shavuot is always, Pentecost is always on which day, Kathleen?
Sunday.
It's always on a Sunday. So that's what Charlene is referring to here. If Shavuot is on the Sunday, so it's on the Sunday this time, it was on the Sunday then also, right? Based upon how we count. And so she's asking the question, if we know what the Shavuot is, we can know which day was the first day that was being spoken of here. So she's asking, if it's Shavuot on that day, Sunday, 3 days back, which would have been how many days, which day would it have landed on 3 days backward? So that's the question. So we need to answer.
And I think we need to understand the start too, because remember we started from midnight. So 3 days before could be Thursday evening, Thursday, and then you go on to Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You understand? So if you're doing it with the day calendar now, you'll get the 3 days going back as Friday. That is my little thing.
So the covenant calendar is what we're dealing with here, which is the start calendar. There, yes.
Right. Yeah. We
Okay.
still need to think that, yeah.
And you know what, everyone? When we started to learn the feasts and festivals, this is what I was taught. This was probably at Pentecost. This Mount Sinai event was probably Pentecost, because it says in the 3rd month. And we know that Pentecost is in the 3rd month. But you know what? Nobody ever proved it. Nobody ever proved that this event was on Pentecost, and it was on the first day of the week. I don't like to say Sunday, because it was the first day of the week, but I'm saying Sunday so that you can all track with me. There are some calendars out there that have what is called a floating Pentecost and a floating wave sheaf. The Pentecost count starts with wave sheaf, and when wave sheaf is on a Sunday, Pentecost is always on a Sunday. If you count 50 days, you will always get to the same cycle of the week. But there are some that put their wave sheaf 2 days after Passover, 2 days after Passover, which means that every single year when Passover moves throughout the week, because it can be on any day of the week, then their wave sheaf and their Pentecost is going to float. So every year it'll be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for wave sheaf and Pentecost. In a cycle of every 6 to 7 years, it'll travel through every day of the week. But that is not correct. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Why? Because the wave sheaf and the Pentecost set dates on the first cycle of the week are a prophecy. They were a prophecy of what was going to happen with Messiah, to show you exactly who was the true Messiah. The wave sheaf, that's another study. Won't do that today, but that wave sheaf study is the backbone of our salvation. Passover, when he died, that's really important. And when he resurrected on Sabbath, that is really important. But when he ascended on the first day of the week at wave sheaf, that is the finishing part of the salvation, the salvation package, okay? That wave sheaf was so important. They didn't celebrate it in the wilderness, because the command was, when you come into the land, that's when you're going to celebrate the wave sheaf. But the wave sheaf count started back in Egypt to get to this date here in Exodus 20. So with the calendar, all this calendar language, when you go back, you move it backwards, it's like a slide rule. You can figure out when Passover was, where the wave sheaf was, and exactly what the date was of Pentecost that year. It's like so important. And you know that in Acts chapter 2, when Yahusha had left on Omer 40, he ascended to heaven on Omer count 40. That was on our calendar, was just on Thursday, May the 19th. That was Omer count number 40 this year. So that was the day that he ascended. And what did he tell the people? There was about 500 people there that saw him leave. And he said, gather in the upper room, wait 10 days, and I'm going to send the Ruach, the Holy Spirit. That happened on Pentecost. It says in Acts chapter 2, when the day was fully come. The day was fully come. So this is important. You know, if you're going to, this May the 29th is the actual date on the covenant calendar when this happened. Okay, so I just had to let you know that. Anyway, you guys interrupt. If you have questions, just interrupt, because chapter 19 is so important to understand before we get into the rest of the everlasting covenant. Okay, verse 14. Then Moses went down. Okay, so he's coming down the mountain on this third trip to the people, and he sanctified them, and they washed their clothes. They're getting all cleaned up. They're getting literally cleaned up on Friday and spiritually cleaned up on the tomorrow, which was this Shabbat. He said, be ready for the third day. The third day is the important day. Do not come near your wives. Verse 16, then it came to pass on the third day in the morning. Listen what was going on. And I think this was early in the morning, probably right at the crack of dawn. There was thunderings and lightnings and a thick cloud on the mountain, and the sound of the trumpet was very loud, so that all the people who were in the camp trembled. They were scared to death. Every time Moses went up the mountain to commune with Elohim and to bring words back, there was nothing like this. It was just Moses went up, he got the words, he got the message, he came back down, gave the message to the people, they got it, yep, they heard it, they were all good with that. No problem. But this was different. This was different. Elohim was coming to meet with them, and they were scared. You need to remember that. And Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet with Elohim, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. They're being very obedient. Here's more information in verse 18. Now Mount Sinai was completely in smoke, because Yahuwah had descended upon it in fire. Now we've got fire and smoke. We've got trumpets. We've got earthquakes. We've got the mountain trembling. We've got all kinds of stuff happening. Its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked greatly. And when the blast of the trumpet sounded long and became louder and louder, Moses spoke, and Yahuwah answered him by voice. Well, he has to be up at the top, but I want to ask you a question. If you were at the bottom of Mount Sinai that day, what would you have been doing? Would you have been trembling in your boots? Would you be ready to back up?
I would have been a mess. I would have been far from that mountain. Because it's all these things happening at the same time. And then you hear the trumpet. I mean, instead of going closer, I would have probably be retreated, going backwards.
Yep,
that's me. Yeah.
That's right. This was a scary moment. You know what? They had come through all these plagues. They had come through all these campsites, these other 10 campsites. And if you read the campsites, you're going to find out they went through a lot. Yahuwah went through a lot with them, but it was never like this. You know, they knew they could trust him to lead them and take care of them finally after all their complaining and bickering, but it was not like this. This was something different. Friends, you have to put yourself into this story to understand what's going on. because this is all about the everlasting covenant. All right. These people said they wanted to come into covenant with Yahuwah. But now, are they sure that they want to do this? So let's keep reading.
That's what I was saying. They make an agreement to say they're doing something and they don't even know the details of it, one. And two, they didn't expect all of this thing to happen. So now they're probably telling themselves what they're agreeing to, right? So, I mean, yeah, that is my opinion on it.
Yeah, when you read this story, every single word, and it comes alive in your being, it makes a difference rather than just reading a chapter with words in it. Put yourself into this story. Tell your children, tell your grandchildren, read it to them so that they understand this chapter. But anyway, Yahuwah came down upon the mountain, Mount Sinai, verse 20, on the top of the mountain, and Yahuwah called Moses to the top. I believe this is number 4, and it says Moses went up. Why? Why? Well, anyway, Yahuwah said to Moses, listen to this, go down and warn the people lest they break through to gaze at Yahuwah and many of them perish. Also, let the priests who come near Yahuwah sanctify themselves, lest Yahuwah break out against them. That was the instructions, the second set of instructions. And Moses said, he said, the people, they cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for you warned us, saying, set bounds around the mountain and sanctify it. Moses said, they already know this. We don't have to tell them. They already know this. Moses was saying that. And Yahuwah said to him, okay, away. Now, the next words are important and they're a little bit confusing. So I want to explain them. He also said to Moses, get down. And basically what it should say here is when you come up again, you're going to come up with Aaron, because that was the plan that Yahuwah had, but that's not what happened. We're going to find out. Away, get down, and then when you come up the next time, I have to add those words in there, you and Aaron is going to be with you. So he's saying that Aaron's going to be coming up this mountain with you. But do not let the priests and the people break through and come up to Yahuwah, lest he break out against them. He's giving them this warning for 3 times because he's absolutely serious about this. He wants them to pay attention. And what does it say in verse 25? Moses went down to the people and spoke to them. But do you think the people heard what was going on at the top? Did the people hear that conversation?
Among all the noise, all the things going on, did the people hear? That's a good question.
Yeah. That's the question. I believe that Yahuwah's voice was loud enough that they would have heard, because it told us in verse 9, I come to you in a thick cloud that the people may hear when I speak with you and believe you forever. Mark that verse in red. It's really important. Okay, we're at the foot of the mountain. Everybody's ready to go. And now we're going to travel a little quicker. Okay, I had to go through every word of chapter 19 so that you understand this. Everybody probably knows that in Exodus 20, verses 1 to 17, Yahuwah is beginning here to speak and to give his covenant. These are the first words of the everlasting covenant. I don't need to go through them with you because you probably know them, but I do want to make one point. In verse 3, it says, you shall have no other gods before me. Verse 4, you shall not make for yourself any carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above or is in the earth beneath. And somebody read the rest of it.
Before you go on, now God is speaking these words in 20, right? So you ask the question, when God was speaking with Moses, did the people hear? but they were always hearing the words, because look, the words here, God spake all these words saying. So that means they were hearing God all the time. Right, yes.
Mhm.
Okay, so go
Yes,
ahead.
Kathleen. Yes, Kathleen, you're going to be a good teacher. You're going to be a good teacher. Okay, because I should have read that. The very first words in chapter 20, and Yahuwah spoke all these words saying. Moses is at the bottom with the people, okay? But verse 3 and 4 is really, really important, because this concept about these other gods is going to be in these words that are spoken 5 times, at least 5 times, maybe even more, but I've found 5 times. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself any carved image. Nothing, nothing. I want you to remember what's coming. What's coming after this
The
mountain
golden calf.
experience. There's a golden calf in this story, okay? This was the second thing spoken here. Verse 5, and you shall not bow down to serve them. For I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. I am a jealous Elohim, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the 3rd and the 4th generations of those that hate me. If they do this, if they break this covenant, what's going to happen to them? Do they get a second chance? We're going to find out. If they break this covenant, what happens? Especially this one right here. What happens to them? Okay, so I'm not going to read the 10 commandments because you all know that. But we are not going to skip verses 18 to 21. These are the most important verses that link with verse number 9 in Exodus 19. And if you don't understand these verses, you will not understand what this everlasting covenant is all about. So let's pay attention. Now, all the people witnessed, here we go, the thunderings, the lightning flashes, the sound of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking, and earthquakes, and everything else that's going on. And when the people saw it, they trembled. And what did they do?
They stood at a distance.
They backed up. they weren't sure about this. That's right. And then this is what they said. They said to Moses, you speak to us and we will hear. But let not Yahuwah speak with us, lest we die. Why did they say that? Why did they say that?
Because the noise, the rumbling, the thunder, the lightning was so, my opinion that they could not hear because of the rumbling and the thunder. They didn't hear his voice. They just heard everything else. So they did not understand what he was saying. So they're telling Moses, no, you talk to God and then let us know what he says, because it is too much for us to encounter. So we will trust you that you talk to him and then you come and tell us what he said. Pretty much is what I understand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because why? In chapter 19, 3 times Moses got words, he got instructions from Yahuwah, and the people heard it, and Moses came down and told them, and it was exactly what they heard. Everything was peaceful and quiet. It was more comfortable that way. That's why they said, you speak with us and we will hear. But let not Yahuwah speak with us, lest we die. And Moses said to the people, you don't have to fear, for Yahuwah has come to test you, to see, I lost my place here, to test you, and that his fear may be before you, so that you may not sin. That wasn't good enough. Moses' answer wasn't good enough, because in verse 21, it says, so the people stood afar off. And now what does it say? But Moses drew near the thick darkness. So where was Moses going? Where did he end up?
Before you go there, basically my text saying, fear not, for God has come to prove you that his fear may be before your face, that he sin not. So there was a reason why God came to speak with them, to show his seriousness of what he wanted them to know, one, and to show what will happen to them if they sin, which is very important, that they will they need to know this, as they would die, because at least they have that idea, right? So I look at it like this. This is a simple example. When you have a child and you want the child to know certain things, do you not raise your voice in a way to say that you're going in anger, and the child shake and tremble? Well, that's how I used to feel when my father was talking down with me, right? To know the seriousness of the situation, but he mean well, right? So that is what Moses was trying to talk to them, and for them to understand that God mean well, but the situation is of a serious nature. That's why he spoke to them. So they realize now, before, when Moses used to come down and say, God say, God say, now God's saying it to them, they realize, okay, we want to go back to the part where you get the message, we go, we accept, because that was just to show that God could talk to them too. You understand? So basically they had the choice. They had it both ways. So that is my little thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Super, super good answer. That's what I like to hear, because the story has to be part of you. You have to be part of the story. Okay. When Yah speaks and when he gives instructions, he means it. He means every word of it, because he said, I want you to come into covenant. And if you obey me, then I can have a holy, peculiar people. Then I can bless you. It's all about blessings. I should just mention right here, in the everlasting covenant, there's only blessings. If you disobey, it was death. Okay, it's plain and simple. That's the way it was. But there was only blessings. There was no curses. This everlasting covenant is wonderful because it comes with lots of blessings when the people stay in obedience. When they don't, they have curses. Okay, but we're not to that part yet. Okay, so here we go. Moses is going up the mountain, trip number 5. But he's going alone, everybody. What did Yahuwah say in verse 24 of chapter 19? When you come up, Aaron is going to come with you, but Aaron's not going. So you know right now that there has been a change of plans, because Yahuwah's plan was a little bit different, but the people changed it because they wouldn't cooperate. All right. Verses 22 to 26 in my Bible has a little heading on it. It says the law of the altar. Moses is at the top, and this is the next set of instructions of the everlasting covenant. All right, the law of the altar. How many of you have been like me and have read these passages right here about this law of the altar, and you didn't know why it was there? You couldn't figure out why it was there, because I've read that many years of my life, and I never understood why the law of the altar was there. First of all, I didn't understand there was more instructions, but I never understood why that followed the 10 Commandments. Is there someone here that was like me that just don't understand why that's there? Anybody?
See, for a subheading.
It's a heading. It says the law of the altar. This is the first set of instructions that Yahuwah is giving to Moses now that he's at the top, is the law of the altar. Okay, if nobody has an answer, I'm just going to tell you. He was giving instructions on how to worship him. When you come to worship me, this is what you're going to do. Remember, there's no sanctuary at this point in time. There's no sanctuary. The way that his patriarchs worshiped him right from Adam is just like this. They built an altar and they put their sacrifices on it, their burnt offerings and their peace offerings, whatever. and they came and worshiped him. They came into his presence at this altar. So Yahuwah is saying, this is the way you're going to worship me. You are not going to worship the way the pagans do it, the way they build up their stones and they carve them and they chisel them and they have a big altar and they have to put steps to get up to their altar. You don't worship me like that. You just go get stones. You don't put a hammer and a chisel to it. You pile them up and you worship me there. You don't have steps so that they can see your nakedness. You don't do it the way the pagans do it. You do it simple. That is how you come to worship me. There was never, ever supposed to be a sanctuary. That's important. Okay. If you have a Bible that's got headings on it, we're going to travel very quickly now through chapters 21, 22, and 23. It starts out in verse 21. Now, these are the judgments which you shall set before them. These are the judgments. When you read Psalms 119, all 175 verses, you will find that David talks about the law, the commandments, the statutes, the judgments, the precepts, and the ordinances. David's talking about all different kinds of terminology that links to this everlasting covenant. Judgments are part of the everlasting covenant, okay? We're actually going to get into the fine print. Now, this is your homework as we go through these judgments. Every judgment or a precept or an ordinance or a statute that is going to be given can fit under one of the 10 commandments. Okay, I'll just going to give you a simple illustration. Commandment number 7 says, thou shalt not commit adultery. When you go through the whole Torah and you find the rest of the bylaws that would go under the law of thou shalt not commit adultery, it's going to talk about fornication. It's going to talk about incest. It's going to talk about bestiality, all those different sins against the body. But it doesn't say it in thou shalt commit adultery. That is kind of like the chapter heading. And then the judgments or the ordinances or precepts, there's different terminology for what the law is, but those come underneath that adultery law, okay? And all this transgender stuff that's happening today and who knows what, that Yah is saying, thou shalt not do that. That is a sin against the body. So these are judgments. And it would be really a good piece of homework to take every one of these that you will read, and where is it going to fit under one of the 10? Because they are now some of the fine print of this everlasting covenant. So I'm not going to go through every one. I'm just going to pick out some that I want you to take note of. From verses 1 to 11, from verses 1 to 11, they are about laws concerning servants. I'll read verse 2. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he shall serve 6 years, and in the 7th he shall go out and be free and pay nothing. Okay. Are you under these laws of a servant? Do you have a servant that you've got working in your home that you went and purchased? Let's be logical about this, because I don't have a servant that I bought or that I pay, you know. So everyone,
sorry, can I pause a bit here, please?
Yes.
So I just want to make a point here that I just want everyone to understand that this language, when you buy, is not as we have come to understand historically in the case of slavery in the transatlantic slave trade, as in chattel slavery. This is about people buying people in debt. In other words, you're going to walk your debt out, either to a family, for yourself, or something like that. So you're not actually buying the actual person. You basically, they're actually solving out their debt. And that is what this is about. So I just wanted to make that clear so that some people might be thinking here is advocating for you to kidnap people and it's all right. That is not what's going on here.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you had brought that out, because I'm not going to go through all the details. But the point is that I don't have a servant like that. So it's impossible for me to break these laws. But people back then, these were laws so that they could have community, so that they could have proper relationships, so that they could live together in an orderly manner, and everybody's going to get along. These were the laws that were set down so that it would be fair for everybody. But you know what, today, I don't know if anybody does this today, but I can't break these laws because I don't come under these laws. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, they still do exist today in some places, Charlie. Even in Africa and in Asia.
Yeah, I do know some places in Africa that do, some friends over there. So they would have to abide, you know, by it's not just suggestions. These are laws for harmony, right? Okay. From verses 12 to 27, they are laws concerning violence. Laws concerning violence. If you accidentally strike somebody dead, you know, remember, your axe might go flying and hit somebody in the head. Remember, those kinds of things did happen. Well, Yah had given instructions of what to do to make these things right so that everything could be orderly. Also from verses 28 to 36, these are animal control laws. One example, if my ox gores your ox, what are you going to do to make it right? What are you going to do to keep harmony here? Everybody knows what the requirements are. So these are judgments, everyone, that are part of the everlasting covenant. Everlasting covenant. In chapter 22, from verses 1 to 15, it's about responsibility for property. You know, what about somebody's breaking in and you know, moving boundary lines and things like that? What do you do with those kinds of things? You can go through those. In verse 16 to the end of the chapter, verse 31, it talks about moral and ceremonial principles. Let me just start out. And if a man entices a virgin who is not betrothed and lies with her, guess what? He shall surely pay the bride price for her to be his wife. So there was some laws about that. I want to read verse 18. You shall not permit a sorceress to live. You have a witch, have to clean the camp. So that commandment that says thou shalt not kill, that's the way it reads in a lot of Bibles, should actually be thou shalt not murder. Because Yahuwah is saying, if you have witchcraft in the camp, you have to clean it out. And that's exactly what they did when they went into the land of Canaan. They had to clean out all the iniquity that was just clear up top of the cup and flowing over. Yahuwah said they have to go. There's nothing good left in them anymore. So that is not murdering, that is cleaning the camp, because Yahuwah knew that if it was allowed to be established, that it would overtake his people, just like it had done at the flood. There's another one, verse 19, whoever lies with a beast shall surely be put to death. So are you getting the picture that if you break this covenant, you will be put to death, that there is a death penalty to breaking this covenant? Absolutely. These kinds of everlasting covenants always were attended with a death penalty. Whoever broke the covenant was automatically under the death penalty. Verse 20. I think this is the first time we're going to come up to thou shalt have no other gods. Listen to what it says. He who sacrifices to any god except to Yahuwah only, he shall be utterly destroyed. And I believe it's going to be in these everlasting words 5 times. If you do this, build an idol and worship it, you are to be utterly destroyed. That is a death penalty. So some laws there. Verse 28, you shall not revile Yahuwah nor curse a ruler of your people. He said, I want you to respect your leaders. These are all things that he wanted them to do, to be orderly. Okay. Chapter 23, justice for all. There has to be justice for all, just a simple heading. You shall not circulate a false report. Thou shalt not bear false witness, right? And we keep on going, and we get down to verse 10. And my Bible says, the law of the Sabbaths. This is coming up to the end of these everlasting covenant words. Now, these are the words in a little bit more detail than what we had in the 10 Commandments. But I want to say this. Anything that is spoken as a covenant command after Exodus 24:11, if those extra commands that are spoken fall under the 10 Commandments or these judgments that are right here, they are still everlasting. If they are new commands that do not fall under what we're reading here in Exodus 20, 21, 22, and 23, if they're new commands, then they are not everlasting and they're not blood ratified. So there is going to be extra instruction. We find extra instruction up at Leviticus 11. Those dietary laws, you can eat this, but don't eat that. Eat this and don't eat that. They are still everlasting covenant, because we know even way back at the flood, there was 7 clean animals that went in and only 2 of the unclean. Those were already established, even though they were not eating any meat type of food until after the flood. But those Leviticus 11 instructions are everlasting covenant. Okay, and how many of us have heard in the New Testament after the cross, oh, you can eat anything you want. It doesn't matter because of that white sheet that came down and Peter saw all those unclean animals and Yahuwah said, kill and eat. Okay, so I just want you to understand, when there are instructions, commands by Yahuwah, you have to figure out if they are everlasting commands, everlasting instructions, or if they're temporary. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But let me read verse 10, because now this is the law of the Sabbath. And lots of times the last thing that you hear is the thing that you're going to remember. So they're at the end, okay? But before I read this, can anybody tell me where these would belong? Where these law of the Sabbath, where would these statutes or these judgments belong in the 10 Commandments? You've got 10 choices. Which one would you choose to place these under between 1 to 10?
Come on, everybody, that should be obvious. See, you could only be wrong 10 times.
Number 4. Number 4.
Yeah.
Number 4 is the only place, because these are extra instructions. These are bylaws of the 4th commandment that says, remember the Sabbath day. The Sabbath day is talking about worship. So now we're going to be talking about how Yah wants us to worship him in other kinds of Sabbaths. And there was land Sabbaths as well. And you all know this. It said 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its produce. But the 7th year you shall let it rest and let it lie fallow, that the poor of your people may eat, and what they leave, the beasts of the field may eat. In like manner, you shall do it with your vineyard and with your olive grove. So he's saying that there is a time for the land to rest as well.
Sorry, I think that one was a very hard one to keep. To leave your land to rest for 1 year.
Yeah, to regenerate itself, right? And also it was for the beasts of the field and for the poor, that the poor could come and help themselves. It was just there for anybody that needed it. It's a really wonderful command. Harold, can you read verse 12 and tell me what that's all about?
Okay. 6 days thou shalt do thy work, and on the 7th day thou shalt rest, that thine ox and thine ass may rest, and the son of thy handmaid and the stranger may be refreshed, the weekly Sabbath.
Mm-hmm. So right here in the middle of all of this, there's a reminder about the weekly Sabbath. Would you say that's important to get a reminder like that? I would. Absolutely. So this is coming again, okay? A second reminder. When you go through these 10 trips, this is what you're going to find. Lots of reminders about the worship statutes and lots of reminders about do not worship idols. Those two things come up all the time, all right? And then he makes another mention, no other gods should be found upon your lips, like don't even talk about them. And then verse 14, 3 times in a year, you shall keep a feast to me 3 times. This is feasts and festivals. These are worship statutes. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. That's the feast within the Passover festival. And I won't read the whole verse just to save some time, but he says you're going to keep the feast of unleavened bread. Number 2, in verse 16, the feast of harvest and the first fruits of your labors which you have sown in the field. That is Pentecost. That's the first feast of harvest is at Pentecost. And then number 3, the feast of ingathering, which is at the end of the year when you have gathered in the fruit of your labors from the field. And then another command, 3 times in the year, all your males shall appear before Yahuwah your Elohim. So he's giving them instructions that there's going to be feasts and festivals where they can come and worship him. Why? Why isn't just the weekly Sabbath enough? Why does there have to be other feasts and festivals to come and worship him aside from the Sabbath day? Does anybody know the answer to that?
So we keep track of the calendar.
Marking time. Yeah.
And calendar is part of it, but there's a little bit more. Why would he want us to remember what Passover means? Why would he want us to remember what unleavened bread? Why would he want us to remember first fruits, the wave sheep? Why would he want us to remember Pentecost and then trumpets and tabernacles and Day of Atonement? I'm going to tell you why. Because in those feasts and festivals was laid out the whole plan of salvation. It was something they rehearsed every single year. And this wasn't just starting here at Mount Sinai. This had been going on since Adam. I believe that that very first lamb that was slain for the sin of Adam and Eve was a Passover lamb. That is where Yahuwah started to instruct them. You know what? You broke the covenant. It was obey and live, disobey and die. And what was the command? You can eat from this tree, but not from that tree. If you eat from that tree, you're going to die. That might have been the only command that they had at that point in time, but they disobeyed. So they were under a death penalty because they disobeyed. And I believe that Yahuwah would have taken that first animal sacrifice, probably a lamb that represents the Lamb of Yahuwah, and sacrificed it there before their eyes. And I believe that that was representing the Passover lamb, because he was telling Adam and Eve, you've sinned, but I'm going to make a way of escape. I'm not going to make you die right now. This little lamb is going to represent the one that is going to die for what you just did. Okay, so Passover, it's all about teaching this plan of salvation all the way from the beginning, how to clean you up, who your salvation is at first fruits, what the laws are to come into covenant at Pentecost. Trumpets is, you know what, he's coming, get ready, Day of Atonement is coming, clean up your life. You get 2 times a year to remember this, clean up, get back onto the white page. And then Tabernacles was all about when he's going to come the first time and when he's going to come the second time to take us home. So the feasts and festivals are about the plan of salvation. And they rehearse this every single year to remember and to teach their family and to hand it down to the generations. Guess what, everyone? The plan of salvation is not finished yet. We are still in the process, and we are still remembering all of those beautiful concepts. So the whole plan of salvation was built into the feasts and festivals for them to come together, to come up to Jerusalem. That was the command eventually when they got into the land, to come up to Jerusalem to worship and to hear the Torah read, to understand what the instructions were so that they could be in covenant relationship with their creator, with their leader, and follow him so that he could bless them in many, many different ways, so that they would also be a light to the nations and be a light to the nations. This is who we serve. And he's a great Elohim because his instructions are so, so good. And remember, David said, there is nobody that has instructions like this. These are perfect. So the feasts and festivals were very important. And when Yahusha died on the cross, that did not do away with this plan of salvation that you find within the feasts and festivals. It only fulfilled the part of the festivals that was his part of the covenant agreement. Now, in a covenant agreement, just a second, Kathleen. In a covenant agreement, there's two parties, and they both have a job to do. They both signed on the dotted line. One party says, I will do this, and the other one says, I will do that, and they keep the covenant together. Yahuwah said, I'm going to keep my part of the covenant. I'm going to take care of the sacrifice. I'm going to send my son to give the sacrifice to cover your sins. And the people that were coming into covenant, this was their part, to keep the instructions so that they could walk in relationship with Yahuwah and not fall outside and end up following the instructions of the pagans and what they were doing over there with their feasts and festivals. They had pagan festivals too. Where did they get them from? They got them from here. They watched what Yah's people were doing. So two people in a covenant agreement, okay? They both have their parts to do. Okay, Kathleen, you had a question or a comment?
Okay, so basically, I hope I'll bring this out good. The Bible is, for you to know the end, then you have to know the beginning. There's a text on it, right? I can't remember the text. So basically, right, knowing also the priesthood would help you to understand the whole concept of the thing, right? The the Day of Pentecost, Passover, these things was there from the beginning, but it wasn't written down. With Moses, it was written down in detail, right? Basically, it was said first by mouth and then written down. It was blood ratified, and now get the blood ratification. And it was with a meal, which is in the Bible itself, right? Now, for the sacrificing of the lamb, only a priest could do so. For the teachings, priests also could do so, right? So hence Moses was the one who taught, was the in-between, teaching the people, communicating with the people, right? So every generation you would get the priests coming down, doing the sacrifice and all of these things. Now, when in the story with King Saul, he couldn't wait for Samuel, he went and do the priesthood thing, so he broke it, right? You must understand that with Adam and Eve, the person who did the sacrifice was Christ. He was mediating as a priest. So you can't deny that, right? He also have the days for us to understand, because I believe in Moses' time, you'll read as well, where he says, say to your children daily, talk about it morning, evening, and night. I read that. Right now, I was wondering what it is he was supposed to be saying. It's these same things, because he knew that they would change the whole thing. Now, if you're not observing the Passover and the Pentecost, you wouldn't know about the whole plan of salvation. You're missing a great part. Plus, you're doing everything on a different day, because he knew that they were going to change it, which they did. They did follow their own changes of it coming down, right? Which confusing persons. Give them all kind of information, you confuse them more, which is what happening in our time. Now we ask, who is the priest in our time? The priest is Christ in heaven. He was the priest from the beginning, Genesis, and he is priest today. He took over priesthood when he died on the cross, because he was the only one could have, remember in Revelation, they say that who could go and do that part he did? I don't know the exact words, but who could do that? And Daniel cried, and he's the lamb slain from the foundation of the earth, because he was the priest who could make the sacrifice. There was nobody else. So all of that coming into play to understand the whole plan is one plan, one covenant, one plan of salvation. There is no 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's one plan. Once you get the end, you should get the beginning. Right, and there everything is thing. But you have to know the rules or the guidelines for you to keep on track, else you would go off course in the whole thing, right? God have a reason for doing everything. So that is why the feasts and them need to be kept for us to understand the plan of salvation and when his what he planned to do for us to save us. Now people ask, why is God allowing all these things to happen? All these things, the plan of salvation. Now, if you're following these things, you wouldn't be surprised to know all these things, because it must come to distract us, right? But if we focus on these things, if we teach our children these things, which I am still learning, I still don't get half of it now, because it come like I am an adult and I learning the alphabet. When I was a child, I could have picked up the alphabet, Ponto. Now I'm a big woman, I don't know the alphabet. I now learning it harder for me. So that is what this is like for me. Now, if you get a small little piece, you will get the whole thing if you put your mind on it. It's so frightening. I would say this is my feeling. It is so frightening because it is so obvious. It's only for us to accept. Now, here's how we won't accept this thing. Moses going up and down the mount so many times. At what age? Who can be climbing the mountain going up and down like that? That's craziness by one. By one. Once is fine, with 2 big blocks of rock on his hand, coming back down and then breaking it, going back up and get back the rocks again. That alone was a difficult thing to believe. The next thing is, when those things was written, it was not pertaining to us. That's the argument, because that was pertaining to the Israelites. That had nothing to do with us. That is the argument. But if you look at some of the laws and the statutes, it pertaining for us today, especially with the leprosy, when they disinfect the tent, they disinfect everything, and they put them out of the camp. What is that called? Where we had recently, worldwide. I mean, how could that not connect with us? Right. So I'm getting too excited. I need to be quiet. Okay, but that is my view.
I sort of jumped into the middle of the pond here because, you know, it would have been nicer to start with the priesthood message so you could understand all this. But just to know that Moses was acting in the position of a Melki-Tzedek priest, intercessor, and mediator. That's why everything's going through Moses. You'll all get that eventually. But yeah, the whole study is just amazing. It's just wonderful. And it all falls into place if you just read the story. Just read the verses in order and put yourself into this story. But anyway, so we're ending up where the feasts and festivals are the last set of instructions. And at the end of chapter 23, there's lots of angel promises, lots of promises that are going to come with being obedient and coming into covenant. Just really neat stuff. But there in verse 24, it says, you shall not bow down to their gods nor serve them. Okay, there's another one there that tells you another reminder. And then at the very end of verse 23, you shall make no covenant with them nor with their gods. And the last sentence, the very last sentence, For if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare unto you. You'll find that about 5 different times in this covenant. Lots of reminders. Don't be worshiping other gods. Don't make an idol, because it's going to be a snare to you. And if you do, it's going to be a death penalty. Well, they heard that 5 different times, right? And I wanted to get to the book of the law today, but I don't think we're going to make it. But we do need to finish these next 11 verses because they're the icing on the cake. So remember, Moses has been at the top. This is my question. As Moses has been at the top of the mountain, getting the rest of these instructions that were dictated by Yahuwah, these are not instructions that Moses made up. They were dictated to Moses. Did the people at the bottom of the mountain hear what was going on at the top? What do you think?
I will leave other people to answer that because I already know the answer to that. So
Yeah, it could be one, they would have had to hear what Hashem was saying to Moses, because they'll have to be Hashem doesn't expect us to accept anything that we do not know, or it's not clear to us. So we accept, we are responsible for what we know or what we are aware of. But secondly, as Moses' representative, even if they didn't hear altogether or clearly, then Moses was relaying to them what Hashem was saying. So to answer your question, I think they heard, although the text did say they heard as if it was like thunderings. That could be a description of how the echo, how powerful it was, and all of that. But they heard.
Well, I sort of
sorry,
lean.
sorry. I
Go
wanted to
ahead.
say
Go
this
ahead.
before you answer. I want to say this, right? I had an experience with, I don't know why God has had me go through these experiences, but I had an experience with a manager of mine in work, right? He was talking to me and I was a little annoyed with him, right? He was repeating the same thing. And then I told him, no, this is just what come out. I told him, I hear everything you're saying, but I was not listening to you, what you were saying. So hearing is one thing, listening is the next thing. So basically, that is why I won't answer the question. I'll leave other persons to answer. You have to take that into consideration. You could hear people. I hear my mother say, don't touch the hot iron. Listening to her is a different story because I went and touched it still. You understand? So you have to take that into consideration.
Yeah. Well, personally, I'm leaning towards the fact that they heard the words because of that verse 9, where Yahuwah said, when I speak to you up here at the top, they hear it at the bottom.
Yeah.
So I'm leaning towards that. But we can ask when we get to the other side. We can ask that question and find out, because I'd sure like to know.
Yeah, I have an example that happened in the life of Yeshua, because when certain things were spoken, the people say thunder it. So I said, I think that is a repetition of what occurred there, because in that same unit of scripture, it is said, or that the people had a heart to listen to, if they would receive me, because when a person has a rebellious heart, the communication that is given is received with fear psychologically mixed with rebellion, because some people don't want to know. And this is manifested not necessarily in a conscious state, but the subconscious rebellion. You see, I don't understand what you're saying. So the disposition is not one of cooperation. You know, it's forms of rebellion. And because, you know, the implication or the meaning of what they're hearing, they anticipate it. In that little document that you gave, the closet, the skeleton in the closet, it is recorded that Ellen White said that people calculate, if we believe this, then we'll have to believe that, and then we'll have to believe this. So I think all those kinds of what they call state, the state was one of rebellion. And so the communication would not be a sweet thing to them. They would hear anything other than what was clearly being said. So they would be hearing the audible sound, but they wouldn't have receptive spirits or the rock not working in their heart. So, they're not hearing in the essence of hear, O Israel, but they're hearing audibly that there's something remarkable and awesome and terrible going on down up there.
So you think they didn't hear? They didn't
They
hear?
heard,
They
but
heard, but they
they
didn't
heard
listen.
the audible sound, but it was their heart was not in
They didn't
harmony.
listen because listening is believing, is following and being obedient.
But I
As,
think audibly
yeah,
they heard, because Deuteronomy kind of summarized,
they heard.
Deuteronomy 4 summarized a lot of what was going on there. You heard the sound only and you didn't see any shape. So I think they audibly heard over a period of time that level of hearing. But then there's the cooperative receiving of what you hear, which is how the word is used when it says Shema Israel. So audibly, I believe they heard.
I am inclined to believe that they heard and they computed. Their responses and their intention is something else, but they have had a clear testimony with which they could have made a decision that they agreed to, and they understood the consequences also based upon verse 9 as Charlie. So that is the precedence, that is the foundational testimony that supposes or presupposes, if you may, what the testimony of the hearing is to be understood by. So I'm inclined to believe they did hear, and it sounded really overwhelming to them. Their heart trembled and failed. Is a common language up to today, is used in the ancient Near East. Oh, I will die, you will kill me. It's just another word of saying they're overwhelmed by fear. It's just another expression to say, even up to today, even my wife's community, they say that same thing, oh, you will kill me. But it simply means they're overwhelmed by fear, all right, or something like that. So I believe, based upon the previous account, like Charlene pointed out, I'm with her that they actually heard and understood, but how they processed it and what they intend to and all of that's something else. But did they hear? Yes, I believe they did.
Yeah,
But
I believe they heard and they understood. And I believe we hear and we understand. And we know we have no excuse. That is why the Bible says we will have no excuse, because we hear and we understand. It's the same as they heard and they understood. Whether they followed it after, that is the choice.
Yeah. Thank you,
God. But when you've heard and you really do understand, you really don't have an excuse to be in rebellion. And that's what we're seeing today, is that you can bring these truths to people, and if they have so much tradition laced around their 70, 80 years or their 4 or 5 generations of what they've been taught, that they come up with all kinds of excuses. Oh, you wouldn't believe it, the excuses that they come up with. And it's like, better be careful, because the instructions are pretty clear. They're pretty clear. But sometimes it takes a little bit of time, right? Everyone is on a different level of learning, and
That's
some
true.
things just take time to comprehend and what is going on. So,
yes, indeed.
yeah. But we should finish. It's good to have a review. Anyway, verse 24. Now Yahuwah said to Moses, it says, come up to Yahuwah, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 elders of Israel, and worship from afar. So here's the command. You're going to be coming up here again, but this time it's going to be with Aaron and the rest of the party. But he says, you alone shall come near and worship. The rest are going to have to wait. Now, in verse 3, it says Moses. Go ahead.
So I think somebody phone or something went off.
Yes, something played automatic by me. Sorry about that. Let me mute my mic.
So you may proceed, Charlene. Sorry for that.
Oh, okay. So in verse 3, it says, Moses came and told the people all the words. All what words? What words did he tell them? He came, so he had to come back down the mountain. Okay, he was up there for the 5th time. He's coming back down. What were the words that he told the people?
Come on.
You have to know the answer to this question. What were the words? What are they called?
The words of the covenant.
Yes, these are the
Come
words. The word
on.
we didn't read them all, but everyone. Exodus 20, Yahuwah spoke them himself. But Exodus 21, 22, and 23 were
Yes,
the rest
covenant.
of the words of the covenant that the
covenant.
people refused to listen. They backed away. So Moses came and told the people all of the covenant words
Covenant
of
words, yes,
Yahuwah.
yes. Mhm.
And all the judgments. Did you see that? The judgments. What did it say in verse 1 of 21? Now these are the judgments which you shall set before. They needed to hear these judgments so that they could live in an orderly manner. And this is where I believe that the people actually heard everything at the top of the mountain, because they said, all the words, all these covenant words, which Yahuwah has said, we will do. Number 2, the second time that they've accepted this, number 2, that they said, we will be here, we will do them. Then Moses writes all of the words, and he gets up early the next morning. He builds an altar, 12 of them, okay, just like they were told to do back there at the end of Exodus 20. And he has burnt offerings there in verse 5, peace offerings, okay. And in verse 6, Moses takes half the blood and he puts it in basins, and half the blood he sprinkles on the altar. Blood ratifies the altar.
You see, acting as the priest there now, right? Right. I just
Sure.
saying. I just had to push that in. Sorry. Right.
Go ahead.
Right. He's acting like the priest, and only the priest could do that, as we agree. The priest is the only person could do that. Right. So that is what I
see
wanted
what
to
you're
point
saying.
out. I wanted to point
Yes.
that out. Yes. Right.
Yes, he's acting as the
Why-
big priest.
Why
Melchizedek
didn't
priest.
Why didn't Aaron do that? Why did the Bible mention Moses? Right. That is my piece. Yeah.
That's a good question. I'm not sure about that, but that might have something to do with what's coming in the second part. Let's think about that. We might have to do that next time. But anyway, verse 7 is really important, because now we're going to get lots of information. Then Moses took something. What was it? He took the, come on.
Book of the covenant. It's right there.
Book of the covenant.
Mhm.
It's got its name now, because he wrote
Yeah.
these words in a book. He took the book of the covenant and he read it in the hearing of the people. So now they heard the words from Yahuwah. Moses came and told them the words, and then he wrote the words, and now he's going to read the words. Why all this? Why?
Testimony.
Why?
Testimony, to make sure they get it clear. It's a one testimony, it's a clear testimony, it's an emphatic testimony.
Well, not only that, because between hearing from Yahuwah and hearing from Moses, and now reading them, they're going to know that none of the words were changed. That's important.
Mhm.
None of the words were changed around. Nothing was added. Nothing was taken away. Those words that were spoken by Yahuwah, dictated to Moses, they're exactly the same words as what he wrote in the book of the covenant. That is extremely important. And then they said, all that Yahuwah has said, we will do. Number 3, they promised, and they added this, and be obedient for a little while. Okay, they were obedient for a little while. So Moses
I can get the text again.
24, verse 24, chapter 24, Kathleen.
Chapter 24, verse 7.
Right. Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
These first 11 verses of 24 are the icing on the cake. Okay, these are really important. Verse 8, Moses took the blood and he sprinkled it on the people. And he said, behold, the blood of the covenant. Right there, blood ratification. So we've got 3 out of the 4. We've got the proposal, 3 acceptances. Now we have blood ratification on the people, and the book is sprinkled as well. Now we just have one more. We have the covenant confirming meal that we have to look for. In verse 9, Moses went up. He's going back up the mountain. This is trip number 6, but number 6 trip is actually divided into part A, part B, part C, okay? So Moses is going up. It says with Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 of the elders. So I want you to tell me how many that is. Just count them up.
75. I have it right up. I have it marked out.
Well, it
75.
sounds like it's only 74 in that verse, but there are 75 because Joshua is by Moses' side.
Right, Joshua, and he was, and they didn't mention Joshua, but he was always there as his assistant. Oh, I'm too good at this, yeah.
I can see Kathleen's going to be a teacher or a good teacher. Anyway, they went up. Trip number 6, they went partway up into the mountain. What are they going to do? They're taking their sacrifices with them. They're going to sacrifice. They know they have to build an altar. And it says they saw the Yah of Israel, and there was under his feet, as it were, a paved work of sapphire stone. And it was like the very heavens in its clarity. Imagine that. But on the nobles of the children of Israel, he did not lay his hand. So they saw Elohim, and they ate and they drank. There's your covenant confirming meal.
Well,
75 of them.
One thing, the text said they saw the God of Israel. Now the text say, the Bible says, who could see God and live? That one I have a question mark on. How they could see God and live?
Yes, and the only way I can explain that is that they must have seen light, his glory. That's all I can say, is because it does say in other places, no one has seen him and lived, okay? And you also know, I think it's trip number 8, where Moses is put into the cleft of the rock. Like, you know, he says, I just want to see you, you know, I just want to see you. And he puts him into the cleft of the rock. And what does he say? You shall not see my face, but you will see my back. So I believe what they saw was a manifestation of light, his glory. That's what they saw. That's what I've picked up on, but maybe you can study it out. But anyway, I'd like to leave it right there. I wanted to do Book of the Law, but we don't have time today. There's a lot here. I think this review was good. Harold and Kathleen, they heard it before, and I hope that our new guest and Shiloh and Brother Amen have heard it before, but it's good to hear this more than once.
I think it was a very good, I think today was good because when you presented the first time, I actually had a review of it, of these things. And sometimes when you're hearing something for the first time, especially in the context in which we may have known it before, and even if I was familiar with it and Elder Amen was familiar with it and all this kind of thing, even when we started to review them, I was presenting, some things were actually becoming clearer to me again. You understand? It was becoming clearer. So for people who had heard it once, the presentation, the study, or the understanding of the covenant within the Torah, you were anxious for them to get it. But the review was a very good refresher. I could see Kathleen bubbling over there. She had a complimentary study which she was doing, which in fact helped because they all, you know, dovetail nicely together.
And not only that, sorry, and not only that, I did over the videos. I had to watch one video about 5-6 times, you know. So even hearing it once, you still need to keep hearing it. And I don't even think this is enough, especially for new people. They need to keep hearing this thing because that is the only way you can register with it. That's
Indeed. So my point was, thank you, Kathleen. My point was to agree with what you just said, Kathleen, and is that the review was good because for those who have heard it the first time and the second time, it would have given some level of familiarity, and familiarity does in fact help with clarity as you start to think about it and consider certain questions and proposals. I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome Bernadine. Bernadine, welcome. You came on time just to say amen. I'm sorry. And you having signal problems, so I'm really sorry for that. But nonetheless, you're welcome. So yes, so Charlene, thank you very much. Charlene, if you can come again and do the continuation with the priesthood and the other bit next week, I think we'll be happy for that. I mean, I think that'll be all right, won't it? If she will.
Are you talking about next week on the 28th or next month?
Next week. Next week, I know you're preparing for Shavuot with the.
It's no problem. I can meet with you at this time. That's no problem at all. It doesn't conflict with anything.
Just for the continuity, so that at least you can have some. It's not the best word, but some closure on consistency, continuity, and the closure on it. So I would like you to consider if you can come, because you're rather familiar with the subject area. You can come and sort of give some closure on that next week. That'll be good. If Elder Amen is also.
I was
thinking to go to church next week as well. I mean, I had to show my face in church, right? But
you can't show your face yet, Kathleen.
Kathleen,
you have got to confirm a date before you go to.
I need to get the ending, because the review is fine, but the people not here, and then you have to do the review again and the review. But I need to get the ending. I mean,
so you need to come back next week, Kathleen, because
I graduate from first year already. I need to go to second year.
Right. So come back next week, and you'll go to you can progress on to second year. And besides, the church is always there. It ain't going nowhere, right? But the process in which we are, progress in which we are now is you're not going to get this.
Do they ever go somewhere?
Sorry?
Do they ever go somewhere?
Then again, but the point is, yes, you'll have to come back next week, because Charlene has a lot of commitments. She's got a lot of groups and communities that she facilitates, and it's good that we can have, and if she said she can come next week, then put off. I would humbly suggest emphatically that you put off the church for another day. Thank you.
Sorry, you could send out this video to persons so they would be able to catch up with the because it's not hard for a person to be in first year and then jump in second year. I mean, they finish first year yet, you understand? So basically they may be lost next week. Next week we may have a crowd of people and all of them will be lost. Then you would have to go back and do a review. Please send out this thing to persons so they could listen and then be in line with what Sister Charlene will be coming with next week.
If I may ask a question, does Charlene have any of these videos on the YouTube page so that I can look at it?
Yes, I did this teaching about 2 years ago on Pentecost Day, and it's about 2.5 hours long. And I think there's some discussion with it that was really good as well. I can send that link to Shiloh. But it's always good to do it live so you can answer the questions, as they come up. But yeah, we do have some information. I don't know. It's sometimes easier to learn.
I'll try and see if I can look at the video.
Yeah, the
even if
results are there on the website, they're there on the YouTube. And like Kathleen has highlighted, if you're going to come to a lesson, especially that is pre-broadcast, to know, well, this is coming up, it will help you perhaps grasp it better, and you'll have more questions that will help for your own clarity when you come to the session. So yeah, there are lots of resources there. But as Charlene said, it's always better. Even if you go on, acquaint yourself there, it's always good if you can come into a live session so you can have your questions answered. And then sometimes the questions that you have and the contribution that you have will actually help somebody else.
I would just like to ask Harold if he could comment a little bit, because I went through this whole thing with Harold. I think we did it in a 2-hour session and then another 2-hour session. We split it up. But Harold, can you tell the group, because I took you through a little bit more than what I'm planning to do. I remember what he said if he doesn't.
You have to refresh my memory because I know we went through a lot, and it was very enlightening to me. And I wanted to take the videos you sent me to the next level. But yeah, it was refreshing. It was, it's coming into a whole new light, and I understood for the first time why the feast, why the calendar years, and where we're going with it. It's not just for now. It's definitely a map, from the past to the present to the future, and we can rely on this map, in everything that we do. He does not change, and if he does not change, therefore we can commit to following the roadmap which he has set up. And that's what I am engrossed with, that we cannot be lost if we're following this map. But I'm still trying to understand the names and the Omars, and that is where I'm confused. And only my personal studies will bring that into fruition for me. That's where I am right now.
So one of the things that Harold said to me was, because I did a lot more than I'm planning to do here. He said it gets better and better. It is such a neat study. And I'm glad that you brought that up, Harold, about the map. This study is the roadmap for the bride, so that she can be in covenant relationship with her maker, so that she can be walking with him. This is not just about salvation. This is about a covenant relationship, like a marriage relationship. That's what it's about, the bride and the bridegroom. It's about the marriage covenant of the universe. And, so many people, you think feasts and festivals is like, oh my goodness, you mean I have to do another 7 Sabbaths? Like, isn't 52 enough? It's like, no, 7 more. It's great, because it's time that we can get to spend with him, that we're learning to understand what this is all about. It's not a ritual. This is an experience. And, I think we're just touching just a little bit of what we're understanding. We'll learn the rest in heaven, but it gets better and better. And truly, I do want to say that there's a lot of feast keepers out there, Adventist feast keepers, that do not know this priesthood understanding. I don't know anybody else that does. Okay. But if they don't understand this priesthood message, they don't really have a way to offer the full package deal of what the festivals are all about. They really, really don't, because this priesthood is the cornerstone. From the foundation of the world, way up in heaven, it's the cornerstone of the whole scriptures. It's where the covenant started, and then Yah brings the bride and his people in to be part of it, so that we can bring others into the house, others into his house to be saved. So anyway, there's just lots more. So
sorry,
I guess
sorry, before you leave, I was wondering this week, a couple get married this week. And then I was wondering why it is this whole ceremony with marriage, where you have the invitation and the spiritual side of it, and the eating and drinking, and then the signing, the signature with the 2 parties and all that. Where did that come from? You understand? Just this week here, I was asking myself that why a person had to go through all that. And then you remember certain texts in the Bible talk about the bridegroom and the wedding and all these things. I mean, why is that so significant? You understand? It's because the covenant is made up, is the beginning of that. That is the exact thing what it is, right? It's a marriage, it's a whole well, as Harold say, is a map. And you just need to get the pieces in to remember those names. That is the one were killing me. The names of these things, which is what the Passover and the Pentecost have me in a mess right now. The name, right? I just had to remember which one you're all talking about. And I mean, it's nice. That's all I can say. It's very, very
It'll
nice.
take you time to put everything in perspective, but just what you have to, once you get the idea, well, not the idea, but the concept that it's a calendar. And when the calendar starts, what event trigger it off? Remember, we have the Exodus.
Right.
So if we follow the Exodus account and follow on from the Exodus account, see what was happening there, why it was needed. You link, for example, Passover with the liberation or the restoration or the redemption, if you may, of the people, then the others will fall because you put perhaps a conceptual or logical sequence to the whole thing, and it becomes easy for you to understand. When you know it's Passover, you know, you count it from around Passover time up to 50 days, you know, 50 is Pentecost, another name for it is, the Hebrew name is Shavuot, and then the rest will come in its time. So take your time, don't overwhelm yourself, appreciate what comes, just do the reading, do the learning, and then it's not going to come in a day, perhaps not even in a year, right?
But Shiloh, you know the best way to learn something is to practice it, eh?
That is truly correct.
So if you practice this thing, if you join a community that doing this thing, you would get it. You would remember what it is and what happens on the day. Because even when you all talk about the Pentecost and all that, I don't know what you all just do on that day, you know, truthfully speaking.
Well, I asked the question, I asked, so for your sake and Bonadine's sake, just so that a different perspective is had, I asked Charlotte the question like this, that earlier on, so that you can hear her take and why on it. And she actually gave us a reference in the perspective when the Shavuot period will be in and how we know that and accounting back on all of that. So I get it, but you know, that's why live sessions are good, okay?
Yeah, so Kathleen, I do want to say, like, we've just introduced terminology. And so just baby steps, one at a time. When we understand the priesthood, we understand what is covenant and what is not covenant, because there's some things that are not everlasting covenant. Then the next step is, okay, are we going to honor the feasts and festivals? Because we see that they are everlasting covenant instructions. And when you make that decision or the group makes that decision, then you would go into the next step. Okay, let's study what these are all about so that we have an idea. And then if you accept that and understand that, accept it, then you go into the next part was, well, how do we find them on the calendar? Okay, so I'll get to showing you a little bit of why this calendar that we're talking about is blood ratified. I haven't shown you that yet, because there is a lot of feast calendars out there, and I wouldn't doubt if there's 666. So we have to be able to figure out which one is true and what are the counterfeits, but just one step at a time. So that's why we're saying the priesthood teaching and what is the everlasting covenant, what are the words, and like what, you know, we didn't finish it today, but those words are written on the tables of stone. We can do that maybe next week. Those are the everlasting words, cut and dry. You can't take them off the tables of stone. Then after all of you understand that piece, then you'll want to go into the next step. And Shiloh and Brother Amen are very well qualified to help you in those areas, I'm pretty sure. There's lots of big things coming, lots of good things. Dawn Day is the cornerstone of the calendar. Priesthood is the cornerstone of the whole scriptures. Maybe that would just kind of summarize it a little bit. Well, then I guess next week for sure we'll see Lionel and Kathleen and is it Zoraida? Did I say that right? Zoraida. Yep. And we'll see you three for sure, Bernadine, if you can come, and we'll try to finish it up. If we stay right next week, then we'll have better continuity. That will be better for everybody.
Very well. Thank you very much, Maura Charlene. You've been an amazing, clear, concise, and a very calming voice of wisdom and good Torah teachings. Thank you very much for that.
Well, I just read the words of the Bible. That's all I did was read the words. I didn't do much.
And give some pointers, which make the difference. Right?
Yeah.
All right, thank you so
Exactly.
very much. I hope we can go away and go back to that Exodus 19 again, between 19 and 24, and see now it started to come alive. It started to come make sense. It started to have meaning, become exciting. You'll start to even pull your own observation and perhaps your own gems, things that we may not have presented or even talked about, or perhaps even seen. All right, because Hashem give you a testimony for yourself first, and then it becomes a testimony also for the rest of us as it is truth. So go dig deep, dive in, and we wish you the best on your adventures in Torah. Does anyone have any final questions or comments before we ask Elder Amen to close off this sector? And Charlene can go and commit to the rest of her day's events and activities.
I just want to say one thing.
Yeah, sure.
If you have the opportunity to share this with somebody, that is the best way to learn, to put it into your heart, to just find somebody to share, even just share a little bit of Exodus 19. Just say, hey, you know what? I found that Moses is going up and down this mountain 3 times, you know, and have you ever seen that? Just ask questions and find somebody to share it with. That's really exciting. And, you know, people will say, well, I didn't know that. Well, yeah, it says it right there, you know, and just for people to have an awareness that, you know, might be a good idea just to read every word and to put yourself in the picture and just see what was really happening, and not just read words on a page, but read the story, find out what the story is. And sharing this with people, it's just wonderful because they see it. I don't have to embellish it one little bit, but find somebody to share it with. That's what I would say. And that's it. That's it for today.
Thank you very much.